Hello friends and welcome. We've probably all heard the well-known line from one of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poems, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." Well, I think many of us over 40 could also easily use that same line in this way. How has my under eye area changed? Let me count the ways. Well, if the eyes are the window to the soul, then the skin around them can indicate just how old a soul we are. It's simply a fact of life that the skin around our eyes is different. Loss of collagen and elastin translates to thinner and more delicate skin, which shows signs of aging faster. And our wonderfully expressive eyes experience micro contractions throughout our lives as we smile, laugh, and squint. And thank goodness we do. But aren't we amazingly fortunate to have lived as long as we have to even experience these things and to have gained quite a bit of wisdom along the way? And we can use that wisdom to counteract the effects of aging with the magic of makeup, and specifically the magic of corrector, concealer, setting spray, and powder to help cover dark circles and prevent creasing so our mature eyes look brighter and fresher. So today I'll share with you tips and techniques to correct dark circles and prevent creasing. And I'll also share with you some of the top concealers and correctors which can help our mature skin the most. But before we focus on these top tips and techniques, let me give a very warm welcome to those of you who are first-time visitors, and give a warm welcome back and thank you to those of you who are already part of this family. My name is Elise, and as a makeup artist who specializes in helping those of us with mature skin look like the very best version of ourselves, I absolutely love sharing makeup tips, techniques, and product recommendations that can help us look and feel our confident best. And we also occasionally dive into the worlds of fashion and health and wellness. Now, just as a point of reference, I should mention before we get started that I've recently turned 77, have very dry skin, definitely have fine lines, and many not so fine lines, under eye hollows, and crepiness. Well, no makeup is going to totally cover up or reverse these under eye challenges, but makeup can make a pretty dramatic improvement in how our under eye area looks. So now let's dive into some under eye solutions. I'm going to share with you a full shopping cart of steps that can be helpful, but you may find that you only have to do some of these steps and not all of them. So it's important to experiment to determine if you only need to do a few of these steps or if doing all of these steps will give you the best results. Well, first, let's focus on a very crucial first step: how to best prep our skin before we apply any makeup whatsoever. Now, I highly recommend using eye patches to help moisturize our under eye area, and I especially love these from Doll 10. They're firm and brighten under eye gels. But because these types of patches are so moisturizing, it's really best to apply them at night before going to bed. This is because too much moisture under our eyes is almost as bad as too little moisturizer, since too much moisturizer won't fully absorb into our skin, which can cause our makeup to crease. So apply eye patches, heavier eye cream, or heavy-duty moisturizer like this moisturizer I absolutely love from Shani Darden before going to bed rather than right before applying your makeup. And I also want to mention one other thing that we don't want to do. We don't want to bring our foundation up under the eye area unless we're not going to be applying concealer under our eyes. This is because the more layers of products we have on our skin, the more likely our makeup is to crease. So skip applying the foundation under the eyes and just use the products we'll be talking about next. I'm going to demonstrate these tips on just one of my eyes so we can compare the under eye area of the eye where I've used today's tips and techniques to the under eye area where I have not. Well, tip number one is to use a lightweight moisturizer or a very lightweight eye cream under the eye before applying makeup. One moisturizer that I particularly love is the oil-free lightweight moisturizer from Hollywood estheticians Shani Darden. I use it as my moisturizer under my eyes as well as all over my face. And tip number two is all about how much moisturizer we use and how we apply it. So take a very small amount like this and gently press and tap it in under your eyes using your third finger or ring finger. Since we want to be very gentle on the thin skin under our eyes, using our third finger or ring finger means that we'll be using our weakest fingers, so we won't be applying as much pressure to this delicate skin. Tip number 3 is something we often fail to do, and it's usually because we're in a hurry, and I am so guilty of this. We need to let the moisturizer totally dry before we apply our next product. I'm going to check right now to make sure that my moisturizer is indeed totally dry. All right, I think we're good to go. Being sure to use a color corrector is our 4th tip. Color correctors are used to help cover or neutralize unwanted discoloration, such as redness, dark spots, or dark circles. And the concept of color correcting is guided by the principles of color theory. Think back to elementary school art class, if you will, where you learned about the color wheel. You are probably taught that colors that are opposite each other, like red and green or blue and orange, are called complementary colors and cancel each other out. And this same principle definitely applies to makeup. So we want to determine the color of what we want to conceal and then choose a corrector in the opposite shade. Now, since the dark circles under our eyes tend to have a bluish tone, shades of peach and orange are ideal for canceling them out. Now, if you have lighter skin, you'll want to use a lighter peach shade, and if your skin is medium or deeper, you'll want to use a deeper peach or orange shade. Most makeup lines will either have a separate category of makeup called a corrector that comes in peach or orange shades, or they'll just include these peach or orange shades in their lineup of concealers. Some especially good correctors can be found in these makeup lines: NARS, Becca, Catrice, Bobbi Brown, and LA Girl. And Doll10 makes a really good one if you prefer using a product from a clean beauty brand. If you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll probably know that one of my favorite color correctors is a drugstore brand. It's e.l.f.'s Hydrating Camo Concealer in Light Peach. It also comes in a medium peach if you have a skin tone that's deeper than mine. Because this product has a pretty big doe foot applicator, and you just want to use a small amount of this corrector, so it's best to put some on the back of your hand and then shear it out a bit, because we don't want this product to be too dense. I personally like picking it up and dotting it on with a small brush, and then tapping it into my skin with my third finger. I prefer this method because the warmth of my finger really helps the product melt into my skin. And it's important to apply it just on the area where we have darkness rather than over the entire under eye area. And after applying it, feather it down to where the dent of the cheek ends and the hollow under the eyes begins. Tip number 5 is to let the corrector totally dry, just as we let the moisturizer totally dry earlier. This is important because if products are still wet, they'll absorb into each other and won't be as effective. Now, on to tip number 6, which is especially important if you're going to have your makeup on for an extended period of time. Take a very slightly damp makeup sponge, spray it with a setting spray like Urban Decay's All Nighter, and then gently pat it over the dry color corrector. We don't want to rub, since that will disrupt the color corrector and make it sheer, so it won't provide the necessary dark circle coverage. And you definitely only want this very slightly damp. So I've already wet my sponge thoroughly, and then after squeezing it out, I'm going to take a paper towel and make sure that it's just slightly damp. Then I'm shaking my setting spray and just going to spritz it onto my sponge. And then I'm just going to very gently press it over the corrector. And before we move on to our 7th tip, I hope you'll take a moment to give this video a thumbs up if you're finding it helpful. And I hope you'll also subscribe before you leave today if you haven't already done so. And I thank you so very much if you decide to do so. To further improve the appearance of dark circles, we want to use tip number 7. We want to apply a brightening, slightly lighter concealer under our eyes rather than a concealer that's a shade that matches the rest of our face. Since it will vary for each of us whether we want to use a lighter coverage concealer under our eyes or a concealer with slightly heavier coverage, let me offer a few concealer recommendations in each of these categories. A really good lightweight coverage concealer is this one from Saie Beauty, which is a clean beauty brand. Some good medium coverage concealers are from Haus Labs, ColourPop's Pretty Fresh Concealer, YSL's Concealer, the clean beauty brands Doll10, and Westman Atelier. If you want a little more coverage, you might want to check out the Natasha Denona High Glam Concealer, the Dermablend Concealer, the Bobbi Brown Long Wear Concealer, or the L'Oreal Infallible Full Wear Concealer. But let me mention one caution with any long wear greater coverage concealer. It's that since it will be denser, you'll need to use even a smaller amount of product under your eyes. Well, one of my favorite concealers is a medium coverage concealer that's from the Clean Beauty brand Kosas. It's their Revealer Concealer. I love how lightweight and brightening this concealer is, and a brightening concealer can be important since it reflects light, and this can help areas that have more texture have a finish that's more of a soft focus effect. And that's a particularly flattering finish for mature eyes. Well, once again, I'll apply it on the back of my hand and tap it over the corrector and then over the entire under eye area with my middle finger. And by the way, you can certainly also use a very slightly damp makeup sponge to tap it in. Since this Kosas concealer has a very small doe foot and it's very flexible, I'm going to just use this to tap it on. And then I'm just using my third finger to tap it in. And you certainly don't have to apply it everywhere that I did. You may just want to apply it in the areas that are specifically darker. But I like to cover this entire area to brighten it. I also like to put mascara on my bottom lashes, but I always do my under eye concealer before applying that mascara. And you can certainly understand why. And most likely by now you've guessed tip number 8. If we want to keep our makeup on for the longest period of time, we want to spray that dampened sponge with setting spray once again, and then we'll tap it over the brightening concealer. Now, quite frankly, if I'm not going to be wearing makeup for a long period of time that day, I don't bother with the setting spray tip. But if you are going to have your makeup on for an extended period of time, I highly recommend using the setting spray. And yes, we've now reached our last step, which is number 9. And this is a step that helps prevent our concealer from creasing. We want to apply a very finely milled translucent or brightening powder. Now, can we totally prevent any creasing from occurring? The answer is a definite no, because our eyes are always moving, but the powder will definitely lessen the amount of creasing we experience. But the secret that's most important to know is how to apply the powder. It's important to look up as we apply the powder. When we look up, we stretch our under eye skin, which means we also stretch the fine lines, which allows us to get the powder into that area more effectively. I like to put some powder into the palm of my hand and then work a brush into it, or you can also use a small powder puff or a slightly damp sponge. And then before I press it in, I want to make sure there are no creases that have already formed. So I'm going to gently tap over this area. And I think we're good to go. As I apply it, I'm going to be looking up. And I'm going to gently press it into that whole area. And then something else that I like to do is if you feel this powdered area looks too dry, and if we have very dry skin, it sometimes can, I'm going to take my dampened sponge and just gently press over the powder. This picks up any excess powder and really melds the powder into that under eye area. Now that we've completed these steps, it can help correct dark under eye circles and also prevent creasing. Let's take a close-up look at both of my eyes. This is the eye where I've applied a moisturizer, color corrector, a brighter, lighter concealer and powder, and used setting spray after several of these steps. Well, I hope you found today's tips helpful, and if you'd enjoy a few other makeup artist tips, here's a video where I've shared tips from some of my favorite makeup artists, which I think you might find especially interesting. And there's one tip especially that just blew me away, and which I use quite often. I look forward to being with you again, and until we see each other next time, I wish you good health and happiness, and hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Take care.